Oui, t'inquiète pas pour moi, OK? Oh mon Dieu! Oh mon Dieu! Oh my God! Oh my God!
That video was taken early Saturday morning by a resident of Lac Mégantic in Quebec, Canada. The blasts were from a runaway oil train. 50 people are dead or still missing, with 20 confirmed deaths, in a town that on Friday looked like this, but now looks like this. Around 30 buildings were destroyed. About 2,000 residents have been forced from their homes. Canadian officials have launched a criminal probe to figure out why this train was speeding out of control for nearly 7 miles. And of the 73 cars on the train, 72 of them were carrying oil. Before it derailed, the train was rolling through the dark without anyone knowing. Residents had barely any time to react. One man who was at a popular bar downtown said he would have been incinerated if he had stayed 30 seconds longer. It was moving at a hellish speed. No lights, no signals, nothing at all. There was no warning. It was a black blob that came out of nowhere. The terrifying nature of this event has bolstered the argument of those who support moving petroleum by pipeline instead of by rail. But although this took place in Canada, this was not Canadian tar sands oil that could be moved by a pipeline. This was oil that came from the Bakken Shale Formation, an oil bonanza discovered in the northern United States. It is now such an integral part of U.S. oil production, its cluster of refineries can be seen from space in an area that was barren just 6 years ago. And the public safety impact of Bakken oil, which is produced through the fracking process, has not shared the spotlight with its high-profile economic explosion. North Dakota boasts the lowest unemployment rate in the country, the oil boom helping the state's economy grow 5 times faster than the rest of the country. The Bakken Shale represents a vision of American oil independence, a transformational development in energy economics. But as we see this week to the north, it poses risks that are as mighty as its rewards. Joining me now is former Senator Byron Dorgan, Democrat from North Dakota. He was chairman of the Senate Committee and subcommittees on the issues of energy, aviation, appropriations, water policy, and Indian affairs. He's now a senior fellow at the Bipartisan Policy Center. He's also just written a new book called Gridlock, a thriller novel, which is kind of an oxymoronic play between the title and subtitle. And we're joined by Tyson Slocum, director of Public Citizens Energy Program. Public Citizens, a nonprofit organization that advocates in Washington, D.C. on behalf of citizens. Senator, let me begin with you. The Bakken boom, which is the oil that ended up in this town that I'd never heard of in Canada and blew it to smithereens, it has just transformed your state. It's completely transformed your state. Do we have the regulatory infrastructure in place to deal with the explosion that we have seen in oil coming out of the Bakken Reserve?
Well, first of all, it's not just the Bakken, it's the natural gas. It's, you know, it's a national phenomenon, and it's good news in the sense that we're producing more here at home. But, you know, this is a description of why you need effective regulatory authority. You need people that are accountable. You need best practices. You know, we've gone through a period of time where we hear a lot of people saying, get government off our back, deregulate everything. Boy, the images you showed on the screen at the front end of this describes why in public safety you need effective regulatory oversight.
And one of the things I think that's happening in fracking broadly is that the technology is moving quickly, the business is moving quickly, the government regulatory framework is not moving as quickly, Tyson.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, there's a lot of problems with fracking. I mean, there are still concerns about pollution of water sources. But what the big deal in North Dakota is, while we're moving tons and tons of oil, you know, 10 years ago, North Dakota was producing 80,000 barrels of oil a day. Today, it's producing nearly 800,000 barrels of oil a day. 75% of that is moving by rail. But it's also seen an explosion in natural gas production from fracking. And 30% of the 850 million cubic feet of gas produced in North Dakota is being flared off. It's just being burned off at the wellhead, which is a major issue for emissions of all sorts of pollutants, including greenhouse gases. So what we're seeing here is the shale revolution is leading to congested rail lines to move oil to fuel cars in uncongested streets. We've got to look for more sustainable solutions.
Well, the sustainable solution, and folks will tell you, this is a different problem because it's the tar sands, is pipeline, right? The Keystone Pipeline, which isn't coming out of the Bakken, it would come out of the tar sands. Senator, you're a supporter of the Keystone Pipeline, my understanding is, and the argument is that it's better than moving it by rail, right?
Well, there are two issues here. We can come back to the issue of hydraulic fracturing, which we've done for I don't know, 50 years or so in this country.
Never on this scale.
Not on this scale.
Nothing approaching this.
But in the Bakken in North Dakota, we're down 10,000 feet, so far from the water table. So, and it's not as if we're not going to produce our oil and gas. We are. The question is, how do we produce it, with what kind of regulatory oversight? Now, when we produce it in an area like the Bakken, or perhaps the natural gas areas in the east and so on, the question is, how do we transport it? By pipe? By rail? Because we're going to transport it to places where oil can be refined. And it's critically important we do that with public safety in mind, with effective regulators who are out there making certain regulations are followed.
You said something that I think is the conventional wisdom everywhere in Washington. It's all going to come out of the ground. We are going to get the stuff that's in there. It's going to come out. Do you agree with that, Tyson?
I do not. First, on the debate versus rail versus pipeline, it is true that by volume there are more incidents by rail. But
yeah, I mean, this thing, I got to say, I mean, I am agnostic into this, whatever the sort of safety data suggests. Watching a town blown, leveled, I mean, destroyed, blown to smithereens, makes me painfully, acutely aware of the danger of moving this rail, which, again, is happening right now as we're talking. It's happening all over the country.
But remember, the incidents with pipelines can be much larger on a volume basis when there is a rupture, like the Pegasus line in Arkansas, the Kalamazoo spill in Michigan, the Yellowstone River spill in Montana, and those were devastating. We're still pulling tar sands oil out of the Kalamazoo River.
But the answer,
moving by pipeline isn't necessarily.
Okay, but the argument on the other side, right? The argument on the other side is it's good for the country, it's jobs, and everything that we do has risks. I mean, you drive cars around, right? We lose tens of thousands of people a year to car accidents.
Look, we were importing almost 60% of the oil we need. One out of every barrel of oil, one out of every 8 barrels of oil that comes out of the ground in the world goes into a pickup truck or a car in the United States of America. So that's the demand side, which we have to change. We agree on that, I think. I'm a big supporter of electric vehicles, using natural gas, hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. We need to move in a different direction in terms of how we power the transportation sector. But I do say this again. We're going to produce the natural gas and the oil in this country. We need to do it safely, effectively, with best practices, and it's good for the country. This is a good news story.
The people promoting alternative energy are not just the usual suspects, I should say. And up next, I'm going to introduce you to someone who is leading the charge for solar energy, also happens to lead the Tea Party Patriots. She'll tell us about her efforts and why they are being attacked by the very people who helped fund the Tea Party. In Georgia, a vote is expected tomorrow on whether the state's largest electricity provider needs to expand its use of solar energy. And the proposal has support in places you might not expect. Leaders of Atlanta's Tea Party are pushing for the solar expansion as a matter of free market choice. But despite the Tea Party support, a political group founded by billionaire brothers Charles and David Koch wants Georgia's utility regulators to reject the new solar plan. That political group is Americans for Prosperity, which launched a multimedia offensive this week, including an email saying utility bills are as high as 40% higher on average in states with a renewable energy standard than in states without one. That's a claim the Associated Press reports is misleading. Joining me now is Debbie Dooley, National Coordinator for the Tea Party Patriots and co-founder of the Atlanta Tea Party. And still with me at the table, former Senator Byron Dorgan, Democrat from North Dakota, and Tyson Slocum, Director of Public Citizens Energy Program. Debbie, what is this fight about to expand solar, and why are you, as a Tea Party activist, engaged in it?
Well, we believe and we care about our environment. We just believe things should be done in a conservative way. We want to give consumers a choice. This solar plan will not have to be subsidized, and we believe that this giant utility monopoly deserves some competition, and consumers deserve a choice.
You know,
it's just that simple.
This is music to my ears. I think this is where you and I can agree about monopolies, because when we talk about the energy market, we are not talking about anything that looks anything like a free market. It's not the market for cars, the market for shoes, the market for soda pop. In Georgia, right, you've got one company basically controlling your electricity, and consumers have no say in where that electricity comes from.
You are absolutely correct, and our stance on this is show us in the Constitution where government can pick winners and losers, and where the government can set up a monopoly and be an impediment to the free market. We believe it's wrong. That is an issue we are also going to be tackling this next legislative session. We will be asking legislators to overturn the Territorial Right Act of 1973 that actually allowed these monopolies to take place.
How do you feel about the Koch brothers, who obviously have a lot of money invested in legacy fossil fuels, coming in and spending a lot of money and going after your group for pushing for this solar expansion?
Well, as long as AFP Georgia is honest with the information, we don't have a problem with that. We get along with AFP on most issues. In all families, you're like siblings. You're going to have your squabbles where you disagree. But AFP Georgia is putting out absolutely false information. They're taking data from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, saying solar's too expensive, it has to be subsidized. The bottom line is solar prices have plummeted since 2008. They have dropped in some areas almost 75%, and it can give consumers a choice and protect the environment.
Debbie, I just want to go to Tyson here for some context about this, right? We've got a situation which solar is plummeting, and utilities, they get to control where they're sourcing their power, right?
Right, and in addition to that, if you're in the utility business, your job is to sell electricity to homes and businesses. The last thing you want is for homes and businesses to become independent power generators by putting solar panels on their roofs. And so Southern Company, it's in their financial interest to block efforts to make buildings and individuals and businesses energy independent. But we need to. The technology is there, and even if a household can't afford to buy expensive solar panels, there are so many companies out there where you can lease the panels, no money,
no upfront costs,
and it actually is cheaper on your utility.
I want to hammer this home so that everyone understands this, because Debbie, I think this is key to your objection. Our power that we plug into is centralized in this country. It's centralized in utilities, and it means the political power is centralized in those utilities. And the radical promise of solar power for a Tea Party activist like Debbie or a lefty like myself, right, is decentralizing that power so that Southern Company isn't just controlling the power. People actually are controlling their own fate and power.
If we want more clean and renewable energy in this country, then we've got to do something about it. 30 states have these renewable standards. Good for them. They're the heroes. There's no saying
Texas is one of them. A lot of red states.
There's no saying if you don't care where you are, you're never going to be lost. Well, the states need to make choices about what kind of future they want, and that's what Debbie's right about this. There should be renewable standards in every state. We ought to have a national renewable energy standard.
Debbie.
Now, I disagree with that, but I do believe that in Georgia we can show where groups from the left and right are putting our differences aside. We support coal, we support nuclear, but we believe in diversification of our energy portfolio. I'm a grandmother. I care about my grandson's future, and our world is using more and more energy every day. We have to look for the future, and we have to make sure we have an ample energy supply. In Georgia, we found a conservative way to do it, and it's brought together people on the left and right. We are forming what we call a green tea coalition.
I like it. I like green tea, and I like the green tea coalition. I'm going to be rooting you on with the big vote this week. Debbie Dooley from the Tea Party Patriots, former Senator Byron Dorgan, and Tyson Slocum from Public Citizens. Really a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Check out Gridlock if you get a chance.